You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to episode 119 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne with you on trade deadline day in the National Hockey League and the first day of spring. How we doing today, guys?
Pretty good, Harp. Always a good day on trade deadline. Even if it's boring, there's still enough excitement to keep me occupied. And great weekend. Not too much going on. Uncle Jake was up for the weekend, and Reese and I started the season Blitzball series, and we split games 1 and 2.
Very nice, very nice. Talking about the trade deadline, that's what we're going to do today, guys. It was a bit boring, and we kind of knew it was going to be boring, but like as soon as I saw Jake DeBrusk re-signed with Boston, and then we saw Anton Forsberg re-sign with Ottawa, it was like, holy, it's going to be another one of these. And then New York Islanders signed like 4 guys, and it's just so classic.
My dad texted me, what was the biggest trade of the day? I was like, I had a hard time. I stared at him for a bit. I was like, I don't know, what's the biggest one? I guess Fleury. That's what I said to him. That's all I had.
It's like, it's not like nothing happened. There were some good deals, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to grade them all, so it's going to be fun. But, just in general, like as we predicted, it was kind of a slow day today because all of the big deals get done beforehand, and we're going to talk about those too. So overall, guys, in a decent mood, had a good weekend. Won again in fantasy that we're going to talk about soon, but I do have some problems as well, which I'm going to go into as well. But yeah, overall, good stuff over here. How about you, Harp?
Yeah, it was good. Megan and I went away for the weekend, went to Nordique Spa, so that's always nice. And with deadline day, guys, I mean, for anybody who watches, and I certainly get more excited about it than you guys. You're right. There are a lot of the big deals that happen prior to, but on deadline day, it starts off slow and then it gets better as the day goes on. You see bigger deals that happen. And so do yourself a favor and just tune into like the last hour of the TSN Trade Center coverage or whatever, because a lot of the deals come in just at the deadline, and they get them all out after, like the Andrew Kopp deal, which we're going to talk about, and so many others as well. So doing well. And before we get into the deadline chatter, let's just go into a little fantasy corner to start. Case?
Once again, another week where Casey gets the most points. I absolutely battered Gagnon, beat him by like 115 points. It was a tough week for him and an unbelievable one for me. So I think after this week, if I beat Harp, I don't know if that's going to happen. It's like I'll be in a playoff spot, so it's all good.
And if you're in a playoff spot, you're likely going to play me in the first round, and that's going to be an absolute bloodbath because we're 1 and 2 in points for. So
no, I've looked at the future matchups, and I'm likely to land in 6th.
Oh, because you'll have the same record.
Because I have the most points than everyone in the league except you.
Okay, well, you got to get into the playoffs, and then if you do, look out for Casey's. What's your team name? Aho something?
Bros before Ahos.
Bros before Ahos, yeah. Last week was a tight one for me, guys. I went down to the final game between my team, the Multiple Scoregasms, and the Danbury Trashers. And it was the final game between Buffalo and Vancouver. And Bo Horvat, going into the third period, had 8.5 points or something like that. And Alex Tuck, who was on my team, had 0. And then Alex Tuck ends up scoring the overtime winner for the team and gets me 3.5 points, secures the victory, and I beat Dylan by roughly 5 points. But it was so tight, I wasn't sure if I was going to win. But I mentioned off the top that I've got some fantasy problems. I mean, it's not winning because like I've won, 15 in a row or something like that. I'm on a tear, and I'm in first place. Have to mention that every single time.
Holy, I thought we were going to keep this.
I know. But I've got 2 problems right now. I've got Aaron Ekblad and Drew Doughty, who both might be done for the end of the season. So my defense is looking pretty rough right now. So make a trade with me if you're out there. I've got tons of great forwards, and help me out here, and maybe I'll cut you some of my winnings. I'm talking to everybody in the league, so it's out there. Just saying.
Good week for me, guys. Got a win against Corey, Mail Order Brides, by like 20 or whatever. So beat him pretty good. And that's good because I haven't had a lot of wins this season, as you guys know and our listeners know. And got a tough matchup this week against you, Case. Not projected to win, of course, because you've been putting up points all year, as you like to mention every time. But we will see how it goes. So I'm pretty happy to come on this podcast, talk about a win last week, which I haven't gotten to do very much this year. So all is good.
Wonderful. Trade deadline talk now.
All right, let's get into it. So we're going to go through a bunch of deals. Obviously, there were a bunch that happened today, and then big ones leading up to the deadline, and we want to include those as well. So that is where we're going to start, and we're going to try and do this in order. So again, sort of a rapid fire kind of way of doing it, and here we go. We will start with Josh Manson going to the Colorado Avalanche from the Anaheim Ducks on March 14th for Drew Helleson, a defenseman prospect, going back to Anaheim along with a 2023 second-round pick.
Well, I'm going to start. I'll go first each time. How's that sound, Chad?
Perfect.
I'm going to give this like a C+ for Colorado because, frankly, I don't know if they needed the piece. They have a couple injuries that are kind of hurting their D, but it's a deep D core, and by time of playoffs, they should be fine. Anaheim getting a lot in return. Drew Helleson looking pretty good. He's a good young prospect, played for the Olympics this year. I'm excited for that, and a second's always good.
I'll give Colorado a B- here because you're right, Case. I think maybe they gave up a little bit too much for an already deep D core, but this makes it so that a guy like Curtis McDermott isn't playing top 4 minutes for the team, so he plugs a hole there on the back end that has had some injuries over the years or over this season. And for Anaheim, I'll give them a B+. And the only reason I can't give them an A is because if they traded Manson last year, I think it would have been a first or maybe even a first and a second or a first and a B prospect. So that's why I give him a B+.
Sticking with Colorado, a day later, they make another move. They send Tyson Jost, a former first-round pick, to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for Nico Sturm. So a good old hockey deal, 1-for-1. And Case, you really like this one.
Oh, it's an A+ on both sides hockey deal. Both these teams got what they needed. Sturm didn't want an extension. He's a great bottom 6 defensive player. That's what Colorado needed. Tyson Jost wasn't working out in Colorado and has the upside to maybe get something sparked in Minnesota. Love it.
Casey said it all. Totally agree. I think it's an A+ on both sides.
Wonderful. All right. March 16th, we'll go to that day now when Frank Vatrano gets sent from the Florida Panthers to the New York Rangers in exchange for a 4th-round pick in this year's draft. So Vatrano, bit of a numbers game, gets lost in that deep Florida lineup, but a good opportunity for a good player in New York.
Yeah, I'm going to give this a C to New York. They have a lot of bottom 6 forwards now. It's kind of filling up. I don't really know who's going to get pushed out of the lineup now, but I'm going to give this like a B- for Florida because, like you said, he's not in the lineup anymore. Why not get a 4th for him?
I'll give the New York Rangers a C for this for the same reason, Case. I think they've got a lot of guys. I don't know if Vatrano is really an upgrade on some of their good bottom 6 players. I'll give Florida a B for this one, though, because they pushed out some money. And eventually, as we'll see, that made it made it able for them to get, cap space, so they were able to bring in a couple more guys. Holy guys, I can't talk when I'm trying to think and talk fast, but I give it a B for Florida there.
So on March 16th, Florida makes another move. They acquire Ben Sherratt, one of the best defensemen available leading up to the trade deadline from Montreal, in exchange for forward prospect Ty Smolanic, who plays in the same league as Kent Hughes' son, Jack, a 2023 first-round pick going to Montreal in the deal, and a 2022 fourth-rounder as well. So 3 assets for Ben Sherratt.
I think it's a steep asking price, but that's the thing. That was the market. And for that reason, I'm going to give this an A- for Florida. I actually like this. They lost Ekblad. They needed something on there to spark the D pair or the D core. And that pairing of Sherratt and Mackenzie Weegar is going to be the hardest pair to play against in the league. So that's going to be really important in playoffs. And this team is allowing a lot of chances compared to the other big dogs. For Montreal, that's a great haul. You expected it, but I think they needed to see it to believe it. So I'm going to give this an A.
I'm going to give it an A+ for Montreal. There's no way in hell Ben Sherratt should be worth 3 pieces, but that was the market that was set by a couple big trades beforehand, and so they got it, and that's an A+ for them. For Florida, I'm going to give it a D, and the only reason I give it a D is because they made this deal before they knew that Aaron Ekblad was out entirely, and perhaps until the end of the season. So I think it's great that they have him now that Ekblad is out, but beforehand you acquire Sherratt. He's likely playing on your third pair, maybe squeaks into the top 4, and he's a peripheral guy, and you give up 3 pieces for him. So I think undoubtedly Sherratt makes the Panthers better, but I think the asking price was extremely steep. But hey, at the end of the day, they got better, and they're in a cup window that, is now. So maybe a D's a bit harsh, but that's the grade I'm going with.
Chad, you and I are wearing our Seattle Kraken ball caps, and they got their dealing started on March 16th, the same day as the Sherratt deal, and Seattle started adding draft picks on this day. That would continue into the deadline. So they deal Calle Jarnkrok to the Calgary Flames, a good depth forward, in exchange for a second rounder in this year's draft, a third rounder in 2023, and a 7th round pick in 2024. Thoughts on this one?
Dude, I don't know who Seattle's going to have play for them for the rest of the year. They have like 6 guys go out and 1 guy go in, but they're loading up on draft picks. For Seattle, I'm going to give them an A+ on this one. That's way too much for Calle Jarnkrok. Like you said, he's going to be a bottom 6 winger for Calgary, but I guess they saw everyone else making a move, so they had to. I'm going to give Calgary like a D+ on this one.
Yeah, I'll give Seattle an A there. They're getting their picks that they desperately need. Although you're right, Case, I don't know who's going to play for this team after the deadline. They've got, how are they going to put together a team of 18 skaters who can even, play in the NHL? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, and they're definitely not making the playoffs now, even with good goaltending. But so I'll give them an A. And you know what? I'll give Calgary a C for this one because there is the connection between Jarnkrok, Markstrom, and Elias Lindholm, which Harper, I'm sure you know about. So I'll give them a C for that because it's kind of cool. And, he does add to a team who's looking to make a good push here in the playoffs.
Jarnkrok had a good chance at scoring his first goal in a Flames uniform the other night, but Dustin Tokarski, man, came over and absolutely robbed him with a glove save. So he was close, but just couldn't get that first goal quite yet for the Calgary Flames. I'm sure he will very soon. Let's go to this deal next, and this is arguably the biggest one out of them all as far as the assets are concerned and the player going to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that's the Brandon Hagel trade that happened last Friday. So Hagel and 2 4th-round picks, 1 this year and 1 in 2024, going to the Tampa Bay Lightning, 2-time Stanley Cup champions, looking to win their 3rd in a row this year, going back to Chicago. 2 first-round picks in 2023 and 2024, along with 2 young forwards in Boris Kachuk and Taylor Radish. How about this whopper of a deal?
Yeah, whopper is right. And I love this deal. There's a lot of shit talking in the group chat when this one came up, but honestly, I like this. I'm going to give Tampa like a A- for this. I'll talk quickly on that later, but also an A+ to Chicago for it at the same time. Maybe an A because Brandon Hagel, that could have been a good rebuilding tool. But just to talk quickly on Tampa Bay, they just won 2 Stanley Cups. No one's going to give a shit about their next 8 years. All they're going to remind people of is 2 Stanley Cups. You know how they did it? Big deadline acquisitions, and they're going to try to do it again here. Kachuk and Radish, they aren't making the lineup. There's 92 games between the two of them. They're 24 and 23 years old, not really making this lineup anytime soon. So fine giving those back. You get 2 fourths back for them. And the 2 first-round picks are going to be like pick 25 and 28. doesn't really matter. I was going to look up in the last 10 years how much points were scored in the last 5 picks of every draft. I still plan on doing that. Maybe it'll be a post, but it's not a lot, guys. These picks aren't as valuable as people think. And for a 30 goal scorer this year, who knows what he can do with Tampa next year at $1.5 million. When you're in a cap crunch, that's a great deal.
Rasmus Sandin drafted, I believe, 28th overall. Has something to say to you, Casey. He's not happy.
Dude, I briefly looked. I had 2 guys that kind of caught my eye initially. Yeah. Sandin, Tage Thompson. So it's all good.
Yeah, that's right. Tage Thompson.
Man, it's like they have 50 games played and 7 points.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to say I've come around on this trade because I fully haven't. I'm going to give Tampa Bay a B- on this one, and I'm going to give Chicago a B+. And the reason I've kind of come closer to the middle than what I was when I first heard this trade, for me, Tampa was getting an F and Chicago was an A+. But the reason I've come to the middle was the one point that you've said, Case, that, no one's really going to care about these 2 picks. And even the one in 2024 scares me a bit, the first rounder for Tampa. But in 2 years, I don't think that's going to even be, middle of the pack. I think they're still going to be a powerhouse then. So really,
it's also top 10 protected.
That's right. I was more so thinking like a 15 because that's even way more valuable, if you look at 15th overall picks. But okay, so I'll go to Chicago. The reason it's an A for me, and I can't, or a B+ rather, and I can't give it an A or higher or anything, is because this team needs to pick a direction to go. And if you're getting this much for Brandon Hagel, why aren't you trading Kane? They didn't trade Kane. They didn't even listen to offers on Kane. Jonathan Toews is a guy who's pissed off, and he said it in the media multiple times. This team doesn't have a direction. Are you rebuilding? Are you retooling? What's going on? So for me, I would love to give Chicago a higher grade for this trade, but I can't because this trade just doesn't make sense for them because they haven't picked a direction. If they were totally rebuilding and committed, it's an A+ hands down because you get 2 firsts for a middle 6 player plus 2 prospects. So that's what I'll say about Chicago. For Tampa, this trade is good because they get better, right? And no one's going to say that Brandon Hagel is worth that much, but the reality is Boris Katchouk and Taylor Radish, like you said, Case, weren't getting into the lineup at the same time. It was one or the other. So now you improve by getting Hagel and you put one of those guys, or you put Hagel in exchange for one of those guys. So you immediately get better in your lineup.
Not to mention another trade they did later that we'll get to.
Exactly. So that's my grade for this trade. Let's move on.
Yeah, Hagel could certainly be this year's Blake Coleman. And important to note, guys, before we move on, Taylor Radish is reunited with his former Erie Otters teammates in Dylan Strome and Alex DeBrincat. So, okay, we will move on to March 19th. And this is a deal that goes down between Minnesota and Anaheim. So Minnesota adds a 2023 third-round pick for a forward who has a lot of sandpaper and bite to his game. He can drop the mitts as well, and that is Nick Deslauriers.
Yeah, I actually love this deal for Minnesota. I like Deslauriers a lot. He's one of the last fighters in the league who can also play hockey. He's tough to play against. He plays playoff hockey and fits their identity to the T. They're not going to miss a 2023 third round pick at all. They're a young up and coming team. Why? Who cares? Moving on.
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess grades. Deslauriers to Minnesota, A- B+. Sure. It's neither here nor there. And then the third round pick for Anaheim, C+.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, I'll give Anaheim a little more credit. I'll give them a B+ for this because I'm not sure Nick Deslauriers is worth a third round pick. He's a good player and he brings some much needed sandpaper for some teams. Granted, Minnesota isn't a team who needs more sandpaper, but he's a guy, and getting a third round pick, that's good. So I'll give him a B+ for that. Minnesota, I will give them a B for this one because I like the player. I think he fits their system or not even their system, their identity, Case. Like you said, they're a big, strong, tough, fast team, and I think Deslauriers fits that. My only problem with it is that, first of all, they might have given a little too much with a third. Maybe you could have squeaked out a fourth, but again, you might not be missing it. And they also have, and I was looking at, I forget who tweeted this, but they have roughly 6 or 7 guys who are taller and heavier than Delorier and also play with a bite. So like, yes, he fits, but also I'm not sure they needed that extra. Like maybe they could have used another guy like Tyson Jost to maybe add to the scoring. I'm not sure if Nick Delorier is a perfect fit, but it's also just kind of a throwaway trade.
I think he's the toughest guy on the team now already.
Well, yeah, but they've got a lot of big guys, is my point, who are probably better at hockey.
But no, that's fair, but
yeah,
it's just going to be hard to play against that team.
Definitely.
These next two deals are big ones as well, and we'll get into these now. So sticking with the Anaheim Ducks, they acquire a first-round pick in this year's draft, a 2023 second, a second-rounder in 2024 as well, defenseman Urho Vakanainen and defenseman John Moore in exchange for Hampus Lindholm and Cody Curran, a young defenseman going to the Boston Bruins. Here's another whopper, and let's get into it.
My initial reaction was this is a lot for Boston, but I have completely come around to this one. I'm going to give them a B because they did lock him up for 8 years at $6.5 million. Like that's a pretty decent price tag for a top 3 defenseman. Other guys are shelling out $9.5 million for Seth Jones. So I like that contract for Lindholm. I think he makes them immediately so much better on the back end. And plus this team has turned all their defensemen into gold. So what can they do with Hampus Lindholm? I'm really excited for that. So going the other way for Anaheim, though, Anaheim has become a farm system of defensemen for teams. They get these young defensemen, make them kind of good, then trade them for a lot of pieces. Piece-wise, I'd give them like a B+, A-. But for the fact that they just have traded away, Vatanen and Lindholm and Manson and, there's more. Montour. It's like they just have traded their whole decor in the last couple of years, so I'm going to give it like a B- for them. B.
Yeah, I'll give Anaheim an A- for this one because what a haul for Hampus Lindholm, who hasn't had the greatest season in Anaheim on a team that's been pretty exciting and pretty energetic and talented this year, and he's been paired with one of the best rookie defensemen in the NHL in Jamie Drysdale all season. So, for a guy who wasn't excelling on a team that has finally started to excel this year, to me it's a bit worrying, and so that's why I give Anaheim a great grade of an A- there for getting such a haul for the guy. And for Boston, Case, you said that you came around because you realized that they locked him up for 8 years at 6.5. While I agree that the dollar amount is manageable, for me, I'm giving the Bruins a D because of that contract, because I think 8 years is like too long. I think in 4 years that deal is going to look terrible. I mean, unless the salary cap goes up by like $10 million, because Lindholm has been regressing over the last couple seasons. And like I said, he hasn't had a good year on Anaheim, where Anaheim has had a really good season up until, about a month ago. So I just think that Lindholm, you were kind of paying for the player that he was, and they're hoping that he gets back to that point, but he has not been good this season, guys. So that contract really worries me, and that's why I give Boston a D.
The best player available leading up to the deadline involved in this next deal, it's a big one, Claude Giroux, along with a 2025 fifth-round pick and forwards Connor Bunnaman and German Rubtsov going to the Florida Panthers on the 19th of March. This one was over the weekend. In exchange for Owen Tippett, a first-rounder in 2024 and a third-round pick in 2023 going back to the Philadelphia Flyers. And it's worthy of note that Giroux was willing to waive his no move to go to Florida. That was the only team that he wanted to go to. Thoughts on this one?
Oh, well, I'm going to have to give Florida mostly for what you just said about this was the only team who could get him, giving them an A+ because they put themselves in that situation. But also the fact that they got pieces back on this trade is unbelievable. I would have thought it was a fair trade, Giroux for Tippett, a first and a third, because Owen Tippett was playing in the AHL for these guys. It just wasn't working out. The first round pick is in grade 9 right now. Who cares? Let's move on. Let's win a Stanley Cup. Now's the time. And a third round pick in 2023. That's an absolute steal for such a, such a good forward in Claude Giroux. Like, this guy is still an all-star at his age. He's still going to put up points for them. He's been there before. He's got the experience. Time to win a cup for Claude Giroux. Love it for them. So for Philadelphia, if I'm giving it Florida an A+ here, I'm giving Philadelphia like a C- for this trade.
Yeah, Florida A+ for me as well. How did they almost pay less for Claude Giroux than Ben Chiarot? Like, literally, the return is very similar. You got a first-round pick in there, you've got a third, and then, of course, Owen Tippett going the other way for this Giroux trade. But, wow, guys, like, the thing with this is, like you said, the Flyers were kind of handcuffed, but at the same time, you're not forced to make a trade. Like, I know you want to do right by your player, but you're not forced to make a trade.
That's why I gave him a C- and not a D.
Exactly.
Because they could only trade to Florida.
Yeah.
I gave him a C-, but without that little tidbit, this is like an F.
Oh, it's terrible. And I said the moment it happened in our group chat, I said Chuck Fletcher is the worst GM in the entire NHL. Now I've conceded, I think he's second, and number one is Pierre Dorian for the worst GMs in the NHL. And sorry, any Sens fans listening, but it's not good, and we'll get to that. But yeah, so I'll give the Flyers, what did I say for the Flyers here? A C? Like, I guess I'll settle for that. Maybe a D. Like, it's not good, but they were handcuffed, so that is something. But again, you don't have to make a trade.
We'll go back to the Seattle Kraken now, who pick up 3 more draft picks in this deal that they made a day before the deadline, and that was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So the Kraken sent Mark Giordano, who's from Toronto, of course, veteran defenseman, former Norris Trophy winner, and forward Colin Blackwell to the Maple Leafs in exchange for a second rounder this year, a second rounder next year in 2023, and a third round pick in 2024. So what do we think of this one?
Oh, I'm giving Toronto an A+ on this one. You guys know I love Giordano so much. I think this is such a great pickup considering the price that was on a defenseman, and a very good defenseman still on Giordano. Plus, who knows, this guy maybe wants to stick around and sign for $850K next year in Toronto because he wanted to be there, and they didn't give up a first round pick, and they got a tough, gritty bottom 6 forward who's we've seen played really well in for the Rags. So I think it's a great pickup for Toronto. So good. They needed to do something on the D-core, and yeah, A+ for Toronto, and like I would say a C+ for Seattle. They still got 3 draft picks back. They have like 7 second round picks in the next 2 years now. So it is nice to get a few draft picks, maybe a hit on one. But the fact that there's not a first involved in this makes it a lower grade for me.
Yeah, Case, I'm going to agree with both your grades there. I'm going to go A+ for the Leafs and C+ for Seattle. Because, yeah, Mark Giordano, 38 years old or not, is still an excellent defenseman in the NHL. And if a guy like Ben Chiarot got a first round pick plus, and Giordano doesn't, like, that fact alone is crazy. I know there were 2 teams that were really in on Giordano. It was the Maple Leafs and the St. Louis Blues. Both teams said that they would not give up a first-round pick for a rental player. And then Giordano said, like the day after, that he only wanted to go to Toronto. So it was a situation where a team was kind of handcuffed as well, similar to the Flyers in trading Giroux to Florida. So I think it's a great deal for the Maple Leafs. I've already got my jersey here. Apparently he bought Nylander a watch, and he's going to wear number 88. And that name bar looks a bit off. But, it's a nice jersey, I think. And Colin Blackwell, that was surprising. But, good depth, some offensive upside that we saw a couple years ago when he was playing for the Rangers, and to not give up a first and just a couple of seconds and a third, like I think it's a really good deal for the Maple Leafs, and they desperately need defense, and not only defense, a defenseman who can play defense as well. And if you look at his advanced numbers, not only is Giordano known for being a guy who won the Norris for having the most points a few years ago, he's also a guy who can shut you down in his own zone. So I think it's a win-win for the Maple Leafs here.
Something to think back to was how much better Giordano made TJ Brody every time they played together. Like I remember I pulled up those stats a while back. It was actually my reason that Brody wasn't that great of a pickup, but now those two could be back together and that could be a dynamic duo again. Chad, why is the name backwards?
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Is it backwards?
Well, Nylander underneath is the right way for us, and then Giordano's the other way.
See, I'm looking at my own camera, and I wrote it the right way first. Then I'm like, wait, that's going to be backwards for the camera. So I flipped it. Oh my God, I'm a bot. Absolute bot.
Oh, that's great. All right, sticking with the Maple Leafs, who turned around and picked up a 2022 third-round pick for a defenseman looking for a change of scenery, and that is Travis Dermott.
Yeah, I mean, one guy in, one guy out here. He's really kind of worked himself out of the depth chart. There's a couple young guys who could get in ahead of him, so it was time to move on Travis Dermott. I don't really know what to think of this because it's a third round pick. I'll give Toronto a B- because they had to move the guy and they got something for it. And I'll give Vancouver like a B- as well because I guess they upgraded on Travis Hamonic. There's just not too much here for me.
That's the thing. You mentioned Travis Hamonic, and he went to Ottawa for a third round pick as well. So essentially Vancouver is trading Hamonic for Dermott here in a roundabout way. All three of these trades that we talked about are sort of linked in a way. And so I'm going to give Vancouver here a B+ because I think Travis Dermott is still a good player, and I think he could legitimately be a top 4 defenseman, maybe a 4 defenseman, if he just plays to his potential. And we talked about back during the Seattle expansion draft that Dermott was a guy who was exposed because if you look at any of his sort of advanced analytics, he's regressed every season. And his role, anytime you give him a bigger role, he's not able to handle it. But I sincerely think that if he plays, with a steady partner and gets a fair shake in Vancouver, he could be really good for them. So I'll give him a B+. The Maple Leafs, I'll give them a C+ for this one because I do think they could have got more for Travis Dermott if they weren't in the circumstances that they were in, where he was on the outside looking in and teams knew that he wanted out. And Dermott actually requested a trade, even though I guarantee that killed him inside because he was a Leafs fan growing up and he loved being a Maple Leaf ever since he was drafted. The reality was he's just not going to play as much as, a guy like even Timothy Liljegren, who right now is on the outside looking in. So those are my grades for that trade there.
Now the deal that we just mentioned a minute ago happened a day before the deadline. Travis Hamonic to the Ottawa Senators for a third-round pick in this year's draft, going back to Vancouver. This one's kind of a head-scratcher.
I'm going to give Ottawa an F on this one because why? Pick a direction. Please. Mm-hmm. And at the same point, Hamonic's not worth a second-round pick anymore. He might have, or a third-round pick, excuse me. He might have been 3 years ago, but there's been a lot of questionable things about, him remaining a hockey player still. He took time off. He came back. There's so much going on there. And, I'm going to ask again, why? Why Ottawa? Are you tanking and trading Nick Paul, or are you trying to get better? And anyways, F Ottawa. Vancouver's getting I guess I got to keep it in line with the Travis Dermott thing, and I'd say it's like a B+ then for Vancouver.
Yeah, Ottawa, F. Travis Hamonic was on waivers multiple times earlier in the season. You could have got him for free. And the thing with Travis Hamonic, and I forget who I heard say this today on Trade Center. I consume so much content in my brain. But Hamonic is a guy who you've kind of known exactly what he is for the last 2-3 years now. So if you didn't pick him up on waivers, however many months ago, 5 months ago, then why has your opinion changed of the player? It really hasn't, right? He's been the same player this whole time. So if you wanted him, pick him up for free. Why pay a third-round pick when you're not even contending? It just makes no sense. And then for Vancouver, I'll give this an A+ because it allows them to upgrade and get Travis Dermott over Travis Hamonic. So they get the better Travis in that deal, and essentially it costs them, nothing.
Yeah, the best days are behind Travis Hamonic, that's for sure. So a bit of a head scratcher there. Sticking with the Senators, and you just mentioned a minute ago, guys, they dealt Nick Paul, and that was to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Lightning continue to add. They get another good forward with size. So the Lightning acquired Nick Paul from the Senators in exchange for Matthew Joseph and a 2024 4th round draft pick?
Yeah, I'll give Tampa Bay. And okay, there's gonna be some bias in these grades here because I'm a big Nick Paul fan, man. But I'm gonna give Tampa like an A for this one. They traded a player who was like their 13th forward, who again another guy that just wasn't really cracking the lineup, and they got substantially better in Nick Paul. I think this guy is such a heart and soul grinder player that can really contribute for them. And now I kind of want them to three-peat because like they seem to grab a guy every year who I want to win a cup and then make it happen. So that'd be great for Nick Paul. So yeah, I'm going to give Tampa Bay like an A here. Why not? And Ottawa Senators, again, biased because I gave up on my favorite player on that team, but I'll still give them a C because I'm excited that Matthew Joseph is going to get an opportunity somewhere. I think he fits in well with the age group and the guys on the team, and who knows what he can do there. So that's going to be interesting. And we're all going to forget about a 2024 4th round tomorrow. So
yeah. Exactly. I'll give both teams a B here. I think, Ottawa, I could give them a higher grade, or I would give them a higher grade if maybe they got something more than a 4th in return, because I think Paul is a significantly better player than Joseph right now. Joseph's good, don't get me wrong, but I think Paul is more established, or at least he's played more minutes on a consistent basis to kind of prove that he can be more useful. And I'll give Tampa also a B. So B's all around here because they get the better player and they're trying to three-peat. So why not? The only thing I will say about this trade and about Tampa in general, though, too, is that they're kind of like Vegas at this point. They kind of don't give a fuck who they give away. Like, not saying that Matthew Joseph or Boris Kachut or Taylor Radish were like big pieces of this team, but they were kind of the next pieces for this team coming in and kind of expecting to play more of a role going forward for, the third cup run. And now they're just gone. So to me, like it just seems like, it's inevitable. It's business. You're trying to win, but it just kind of sucks for those players, don't you think?
I think it's a different story than Vegas because like these guys are 24 years old and they were given opportunities to kind of crack into this lineup. Didn't really work out for them. Vegas is just like no one's safe.
Yeah, true. Clearly they're at different tiers, but I feel like the not give a shit meter is at least engaged and for both teams here.
Yeah. All right, we got a lot of trades to go through here, so I'm going to start hitting the buzzer if you're going too long.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Back to the Seattle Kraken. They get a 2nd round pick in this year's draft from the Nashville Predators for a young defenseman in Jeremy Lauzon.
B- for Nashville. Big, hard to play against defensemen, can turn them into something. And I'll give Seattle a B as well for a 2nd round pick. I think that's a pretty decent price for Lauzon.
Yeah, D for Nashville for me. I think sure you get better, but at the same time that's way too much to pay for that kind of defenseman. Seattle, I'll give them another A+ because they just keep bringing in these picks that are going to be useful.
A guy who you could have gotten for free a little while ago was Scott Wedgwood. Now he gets claimed by Arizona. He's played pretty well, but he goes to the Dallas Stars from the Coyotes for a 4th round pick in 2023.
Yeah, so this one, absolutely mind-blowing to me. Another waiver player that gets traded for a 4th round pick. Dallas, I guess they need a 3rd-string goalie. There's something in their head. So I'm going to give them a D on this one, or a D-, and I'll give Arizona a B+.
Very hesitant. I'll give Dallas a D. The only reason it's not an F to get Scott Wedgwood, not saying he's a bad player, but he was on waivers like a month ago. You could have just picked him up. But the reason I'm not giving them an F is because they need a guy now that Holtby is injured. So I'll give him a D. And the Coyotes, you got a 4th for a guy who you claimed off waivers. That's an A+ in my books.
And that was another deal that came yesterday, so a day before the deadline. Sticking with the Coyotes, they pick up the rights to prospect Jack McBain, a big forward from the Minnesota Wild, for a 2nd round pick in this year's draft. Arizona had a lot of 2nd rounders, one of 5 actually in this year's draft to part ways with. They do so in this deal for Jack McBain.
Yeah, this deal kind of scares me. I'm pretty sure Jack McBain can just walk. I think he's a senior in the NCAA, so I'm pretty sure if he wanted to sign with Arizona or not sign with Arizona, he can just not do that. He has put up a lot of points in the NCAA this year, so if they are able to retain him, then I think it's a great deal for Arizona player-wise. That's a lot to give up with a lot of question marks. So I'm going to give Arizona a C here, and I'll give Minnesota a B-.
Yeah, seems like a pretty high risk, high reward deal here for Arizona in getting the player. I don't know much about the player. I just looked at his stats earlier, and they seem to be pretty good in the NCAA. So, I'll give Arizona a C because of the uncertainty, if that is the case, if he can walk. I don't know the details of signing seniors and how that works. I'd have to remember who the last guy was. But and I'll give Minnesota an A for getting a second round pick for... Clearly, if they're trading the rights to this guy, they kind of realize that he doesn't want to play there. So I'll give him an A for that.
Another deal a day before the deadline. Mason Appleton from the Seattle Kraken goes back to the Winnipeg Jets. Good bottom six forward in exchange for a 4th-round pick in 2023.
I'm going to give Winnipeg a B here, getting back a guy who fit in well with their lineup last year, and I'm sure all the guys like him, so why not do this move? Seattle, I'm actually going to give them an A here simply because of the other shit that happened to them earlier in this year where they took guys in the expansion draft and then lost them for free, like Nathan Bastian. So I'm going to give them an A in the fact that they actually got something in return instead of just completely screwing this up again.
Yeah. I'll give Winnipeg a B. I think, like you said, Case Mason Appleton, coming from Winnipeg before the expansion draft, I think he'll fit in well there. And it kind of gives us a direction of what Winnipeg's trying to do. They still think that they're a team that can push for the playoffs. So he's a bit of depth there. And they had one of the best third lines in the NHL last season and the year before that as well. And Mason Appleton factored into that. So I like it. Giving up a 4th in 2023 isn't too bad. I do think Seattle could have squeezed more, maybe a 3rd. So I'll give Seattle C+ for that one.
Moving on to deadline deal now, and again, we're really sticking with trades that we feel have the most significance, and so the picks involved 4th round or higher, and that's kind of how we're doing it. So here's a deadline day deal, and it's sticking with the Seattle Kraken. So they send Marcus Johansson back to the Washington Capitals for a young forward in Daniel Sprong, a 4th-round pick in this year's draft, and a 6th-round pick in next year's draft. Case, you like to return here for Seattle.
Yeah, I'm going to actually give Washington an F on this one. Haven't really given much of those out. I think Daniel Sprong's a better player than Marcus Johansson. So for that reason, I'm going to give Seattle an A+ here. They got the better player in the deal and a 4th and a 6th. That sounds pretty good. He might immediately be their 3rd best goal scorer on this team.
Yeah, I love this from Seattle's perspective. I'll give them an A+ for this. I'm not going to be as harsh to Washington because they know Marcus Johansson and maybe they just think that he can fit what they're trying to do better. So for that reason, I will give them a D, but value-wise, I'm with you, Case. I think this is an F.
That's a big price for a suitcase.
Couple of deals coming up here for the Minnesota Wild. So they acquire Marc-Andre Fleury. Billy Guerin would be very familiar with him from his days in Pittsburgh in exchange for a 2022 conditional 2nd-round pick. And the condition on that is this. So it becomes a 1st-rounder if Minnesota makes the conference finals. So Minnesota shores up that goaltending position.
Yeah, there is one more condition. I think I read that if Fleury has to play or win 4 games in the first series as well.
Four games he has to win over the first 2 series, I believe.
2 series. So I think for that reason, I think it gets a little better for Chicago. I'm going to give it like maybe a B- because I think they could have got more from Marc-Andre Fleury, the Vezina winning goalie. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I feel like they had to trade him. It was kind of, in stone for them. So yeah, I'll give them a B. Minnesota, okay, their goaltending tandem just got way better. I like Kakkonen, but man, that's a good pickup for Minnesota, and it's going to be interesting to see who they pick for the playoffs going forward. So I'll give them an A- here. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is an A+ for Chicago because they paid nothing to get Marc-Andre Fleury, like literally nothing, and they're getting a second-round pick in return, which is just crazy, guys. Like, he won the Vezina last season. It just makes no sense. Like, the value of goalies has just plummeted, and it's partly because he's had a bad season this year. He's also played on a bad team, so we'll see if he can bounce back in Minnesota. But, guys, my favorite stat, goals saved above expected. He's been below expected all season this year. And Mike Johnson actually brought that up on TSN, which I wanted to mention. One of the only guys who uses advanced analytics on the broadcast, and I absolutely loved it. Sent it to you, Case. Mike Johnson is the GOAT. For Minnesota, you get a goalie who is capable of winning in the playoffs, and all it costs was a conditional second-round pick. If you do make it, all the way it becomes a first. I don't mind it, so I'll give them a C+. But based on Fleury's play this year, I don't think he's worth a second-round pick, unfortunately. And I'm happy the Leafs dodged that bullet.
So Minnesota gets a good goaltender, and they give up a young goaltender right after they make this deal. They give up Kaapo Kähkönen, who you just mentioned, Case, along with a 5th-round pick in this year's draft, to the San Jose Sharks for a defenseman in Jacob Middleton. So Minnesota adds to an already strong blue line.
Yeah, and for that reason, I'm only going to give them a C+ on this trade. I'm kind of curious who gets pushed out of the lineup. A lot of people are going to say John Merrill right away, but if you look at the advanced analytics and the stats for his pairings, it's in the top for all the good defensive stats. All 3 of Minnesota's pairings are. So I was it's kind of curious that they did this, but it's a similar trade to what Tampa Bay did when they brought in Bogosian, and look how that worked out for them. So I'll still give them a C+ on that one. And then San Jose, I'm going to give them a A- here. I like that they finally got better in goaltending. Reimer's played really well for them, but I don't know if that's the solution going forward. So I like the deal for San Jose, and adding the 5th is just a bonus.
I love the deal for San Jose. I don't really think they need Middleton right now going forward, especially if they plan on rebuilding anytime soon. And I think they need a goaltender. And I think Kähkönen has shown last season that he can be the guy to sort of carry a team. And, he's, as long as he's able to start and become an actual starter in the NHL, this will be a fantastic deal, just giving up, a depth defenseman. And I do like Middleton a lot. So I'll give San Jose, I think this is really good, guys. I'm going to give it an A, maybe. And I'll give Minnesota here, same as you, Case, a C+.
All right.
And again, all of these deals that we're ripping through now were from today. We're from deadline day.
Yes, and let's rip.
Just wanted to, yeah. So back to the Philadelphia Flyers. They make the Giroux deal with Florida, and then on deadline day, they send veteran defenseman Justin Braun, a right shot D, to the New York Rangers in exchange for a 3rd-round pick in 2023.
Rangers, I'll give them a B here. Hard to play against defensemen, not really what he used to be, but I still think it adds to their core. And the Flyers, passing grade, C+ or something, because they got something. I don't know.
Yep. I'm actually going to agree with both their case, because I like this deal for New York because, you add sort of a low risk option here. You're not going out and getting a Sherrod and spending assets, because personally, I don't think New York is there yet. I don't think they're a contending team without Shesterkin. So yeah, add a bit, see what you can do, but don't sell the farm. And so I'm glad they did sort of a low risk deal there. And the Flyers, you get a pick, it's a 3rd. That's kind of high. I'll give them a passing grade as well. Serious.
All right, another defenseman who gets dealt in a trade, and that is Brett Kulak, going from one Canadian market to another. And so Kulak goes from the Montreal Canadiens to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for defenseman William Lagesson and a 2nd-round pick in this year's draft. So these returns for Kent Hughes are looking great, and we've got another one here.
I'm going to give the Edmonton Oilers a D here. I guess they went out and they needed to address the defensive part of their defensemen, and they did that. But at the same time, they picked up a guy who had stints in Laval in the last 2 seasons and traded a 2nd-round pick and a player for it. So I'm going to give them a D, and I'm going to give Montreal a A here.
I'm going to give Montreal an A+. They're making out like bandits today, guys. And, that is just a great return for a guy like Brett Kulak. And then Sherrod on top of that. And as we'll see next, we've got Arturi Lehkonen, who they got a great return for. So I love it for the Habs. A+ right there. And for the Oilers, for Brett Kulak, I'll give him a C+ because I do think he addresses a need for that team, which is a defenseman who can actually play defense. And, if you look at some Montreal Canadiens defensemen, Brett Kulak can actually make a first pass out of his zone. He's been decent at it this year. I think he might even be a better fit for the Oilers than a guy like Ben Chiarot, and he didn't cost a first plus. So yeah, I'll give him a C+. I think it was fine, still an overpay though.
This is kind of cool for Brett Kulak. Before I went into this trade, I said, from one Canadian market to another, the only 3 teams that he's played for in his NHL career now, all Canadian teams, Calgary, Montreal, and Edmonton. That's pretty cool, if you ask me. We'll stick with Montreal, who sends Arturi Lehkonen to the Colorado Avalanche. Chad, you mentioned him a second ago. And Montreal, again, great return for Lehkonen. They get Justin Barron, the defenseman from the Halifax Mooseheads in the queue, and a second-round pick in 2024.
I'm going to give them an A- on this one, simply because Lehkonen fit in so well there. He played very well with Gallagher, and I think he's going to be missed there. But because of the state of Montreal, I think this trade makes a lot of sense. Justin Barron, that's a pretty great pickup. He's putting up some decent points in the AHL as a defenseman, and picking up that second-round pick is no slouch, even though it's ages away from now, it feels like. And then Colorado, I'll have to give them a B+ here. They've got a lot of options on defense, so trading away one wasn't the end of the world for them. And Lehkonen's going to fit in well in that bottom 6. And like I said, if you pair him with the right guys, he can actually pop off. So I think it's a good pickup as well.
Definitely. A lot of offensive upside for Arturi Lehkonen. I'm giving both teams an A+ for this one, guys, because for Montreal, like you mentioned, Case, such a great return. Even though that pick is 2 years from now, you get a guy, Justin Barron, who sort of fits their timeline now, and Arturi Lehkonen doesn't. Commit to the rebuild. Kent Hughes is doing that, and I love it. So A+ for the Habs. Also A+ for Colorado, because what was the one thing we talked about in our last episode before this, our Central Division rankings? It was about Colorado and our question marks about their bottom 6. Well, I think after today, guys, their bottom 6 is looking pretty damn fine, and Arturi Lehkonen as sort of a middle 6 player, if you will, I think fits in really well.
Got to be excited about Montreal's blue line for the future, guys. Caden Gooley and now Justin Barron are a big part of that. Let's go to the guy who goes back to his hometown, and that is Zach Senyshyn, who was dealt by the Boston Bruins today, along with a 5th-round pick in this year's draft, to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for defenseman Josh Brown and a 7th-round pick in this year's draft. So a player and a pick going each way, but of course, the player of note in this deal is Zach Senyshyn, I would say. Yeah, no,
for sure. And I'm going to give Ottawa a B+, A- here. I'm kind of stuck between the two. They're quite possibly turning into the land of opportunity here, and maybe Zach Senyshyn's going to get his opportunity. I really hope so. And it's his hometown. That's always exciting for them to do that. Picking up a 5th round as well. Didn't give up too much in return, a 7th-round pick, totally forget about. And Josh Brown, big, hard-playing defenseman, but I think they've got a lot of options on D, so I'm not too worried about them there.
Yeah, I'll give B+ all around here, because I think Boston, they get a bit bigger, they get a bit tougher on the back end. That's always good. You need defensive depth. And they give away Zach Senyshyn, which, you look back to that draft, that 2015 draft, I believe it was, guys, where they had those 3 picks in a row, missed on all of them, including DeBrusk, who is probably the best player. And it sucks because, Senyshyn is a hometown guy. Well, he's an Ottawa guy, good friends with our buddy Pesky, and you want to see him succeed. And hopefully he does in Ottawa and gets every opportunity to do so.
We haven't talked about the St. Louis Blues yet, and they made a nice ad on deadline day, picking up veteran defenseman Nick Leddy along with winger Luke Witkowski from the Detroit Red Wings, who have really fallen off the last month and a half or so. And in the deal, they get defenseman Jake Wallman, Oscar Sundqvist, the former Pittsburgh Penguin, and a 2023 second-round pick.
Yeah, I like this for St. Louis a lot. I'm going to give them an A- here. Nick Leddy, like you said, veteran defenseman. He's only 31 years old. He's played 121 games in the playoffs. He's been there before, and that's always good to add, especially on defense, because that's where experience really matters to me. So I like the deal for St. Louis, and Detroit picked up a pretty good return. And Sundqvist, there's something about him that I could just see him in a Detroit jersey, So I like this trade for both of them. I'll give Detroit an A- as well.
I'll give St. Louis here a B, because I think they overpaid a bit for Nick Leddy. That's the main piece. But like you said, Case, he's a guy with a ton of playoff experience, and the St. Louis Blues are a team who thrive in the playoffs. So he fits that bill there. For Detroit, I'll give him an A+, because I think getting a second round pick for Nick Leddy is fantastic. Plus, you get the two guys as well, Sundqvist and Wallman. There's one thing that you can say about Stevie Y. I mean, you could say a million things about him. He's one of the best GMs in the NHL, but he really knows how to manage his assets. And this is just like textbook managing assets 101, and he's doing a really great job. So I have to give them an A+.
So we'll go from the 2019 Stanley Cup winners to the 2018 Stanley Cup winners in the Washington Capitals. They make a deal on deadline day, their second one, and that is acquiring Johan Larsson from the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for a third-round pick in 2023. Larsson has a $1.4 million cap hit for this season. Before he becomes UFA, Arizona is going to retain half of that salary. So Washington just able to fit him in their cap situation. What do we think about this one?
Yeah, the Bank of Arizona remains open. I'm going to give Arizona an A+ on this one, because they got a lot better return than I did when I did my Arizona rebuild in NHL. They picked up a third round pick for on most teams a 15th forward, so I don't feel bad for them here at all. And Washington, I'm on the Washington hate train today, even though I've loved them this year. I'm gonna give them a D- here.
It's funny you're on the Washington hate train, because Biz Nasty said today on Instagram, he said every team in the West is a contender except for Washington. So you guys are kind of on the same wavelength.
I didn't see that.
What did I say? The West?
Yeah.
Oh my God. North, south, east, west. Okay.
That's okay.
I'm going to give Arizona here a B+, because they got a return for a guy who, like you said, Case, is just a depth forward. And I think a third round pick is good. For Washington, I'll give him a C+, because I think it's always nice to have depth forwards, but that's a bit of a tall price tag for Johan Larsson. And not I don't hate Johan Larsson as much as you do, Case. I think he still has some upside and is a good depth forward, but I don't think he's quite a 15th forward on this
the Marianas Trench of depth players.
Yeah, I think it's always, you can't have too much depth though. That's what I'll say.
I do like Larsson,
Yeah, because he was good in Buffalo. He's been
decent in Arizona. He actually has been, but a third rounder for a fourth liner, that's a lot.
He's been good on an OHL team. You're right.
Oh goodness. All right. Tyler Mott, who again another popular name, a middle six forward with some sandpaper. So he goes to the New York Rangers from Vancouver for a fourth round pick in 2023. Honestly, I would reverse these two deals, a fourth for Larsson and a third for Mott. Kind of surprised at how little Vancouver got for Tyler Mott in this deal. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm going to give a C- for Vancouver here. Not a lot in return, but also at the same time, they're not really giving up too much that's going to hurt this team. So I'll take it for them, C-. And then for the Rangers, I'm going to for the same reason I mentioned before, I'm going to give them a C here, because it's like they have like 7 Tyler Motts on this team, I feel like, and you can't put all those guys on the ice at the same time. So yeah, I'll give them a C. They did pick up like a middle 6 winger instead of just the bottom 6 winger like the other guys, but still, it's like a little redundant at this point.
Yeah, I agree with the redundancy point, Case. I'm going to give C pluses both ways. C plus to Vancouver because Tyler Mott is a peripheral player. You know, he's not part of any group moving forward that they needed to keep, so might as well get something for him. They got a 4th. They probably could have got more though, so that's why it's a C plus. They might have got a 3rd or something. And for New York, again, getting another bottom 6, middle 6 player who, adds to this team and their depth. But again, I don't think New York is even a playoff team without Igor Shesterkin this season. So I just don't know, their direction right now, or if they think they can kind of make a run. But at the same time, keeping in that same vein, I am glad that they didn't go out and sell the farm here, and they just made a small, they paid a small price for a player who can make an impact. So that's why it's a C plus.
Well said. So guys, I'm going to mix up the order a little bit. We've got 4 or 5 trades left. 4 deals left, excuse me. And I will, I'm just going to mix up the order a little bit so that we finish off with a couple of sizable deals. So let's get to Vlad Namestnikov going from the Detroit Red Wings to the Dallas Stars in exchange for a 4th round pick in 2024. So again, we see Namestnikov moved at another trade deadline.
Yeah, it's the story of this guy's life. I don't really know what to think about this team. Namestnikov kind of seems like he's born for Dallas when you look at all the other guys on this team, Nichushkin and Radulov. It's like, I don't know, it seems like he's going to fit in well there. Dallas is kind of turning into Team Russia. They get some depth scoring here. They don't really give up too much in return. I'm going to give them a B for Dallas, B for boring, and and Detroit, I don't know if this is as good of asset management as you mentioned, so I'm going to give them a C for stupid.
That one makes sense. I like the B for boring one too, Case, as well as the C for stupid. So I'll give a B for boring to Dallas for this one. He's a guy. All it cost was a 4th round pick. You add this, to your forward depth, and this signals to us that Dallas thinks that they can make the playoffs here, and they're going to make a push, which I guess is a good thing, if you've got that aging core. So I'll give it a B. And then for Detroit, I think, it is still a good example of asset management, because what is Namestnikov going to do for Detroit for the end of this season? You might as well get something for him and kind of tank the last half of the season because they fell off. So 4th round pick, I think I'll give that a B plus for Detroit.
I typically agree with you, but I'm fairly certain he was playing on the first line with Raymond and Larkin. So that seemed to have been working for Raymond. So I don't really want to mess up a good thing. But at the same time, that was before Jacob Vrana came back. So
yeah. Gives opportunities to other guys like Vrana, like maybe a Joe Veleno step up in the lineup or something. I like it. I think it's good.
All right, and the Carolina Hurricanes, very quiet leading up to the deadline and on deadline day. They signed Jesperi Kotkaniemi to an 8-year extension at $4.82 million AAV, and then they acquired Max Domi from the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for 2 prospects, one of them being former Maple Leafs prospect Igor Korshkov, as you mentioned off-air, Chad. So what do we think about this one? Domi to Carolina.
Chad, why don't you go first on this one? Because I don't really know too much about either of these prospects. And if you know anything about Korshkov, then take it away.
I know a little about Korshkov. I know he wasn't good enough to make the Maple Leafs. That's about it. I think he's still an American Hockey League player at this point, but has some upside. He's physical. So you can say that as well. He's a bigger guy. But that's the extent of my knowledge about Igor Korshkov. The other guy I know nothing about, and it seems like Carolina, and I'll be totally honest with that. I know nothing about that player, and it seems like Carolina just got Max Domi for free, which blows my mind. So I'll give Carolina an A because I think there's high upside with a guy like Domi. I believe he had 72 points 2 years ago or something like that, 3 years ago. So there's definitely upside there. And for Columbus, I don't know. I'll give them a C, because why couldn't you make this guy fit in? He was a great player in Montreal.
Yeah, well, I don't really know what to say about this one. I'll give Carolina a conditional A, because I'm curious to see what sort of contract they're going to get Domi, if one at all. So depending on the contract, this grade could go down. But it's a good kind of middle six piece for them. They don't have to play a defenseman at forward anymore, or go 7D or whatever nonsense they were doing before. So I think that kind of works for them. So yeah, conditional A. And then Columbus, I guess you're going to lose them next year anyways. So I like it. C, Chad. We'll stick with that.
Yeah, it's funny when we don't really know anything about these two guys. Like Korshkov, I've at least heard of. But anyway, Case, I wanted to ask quick while we're on the topic, what did you think of the Kotkaniemi deal? 8 years, just shy of $5 million per. I really like it personally. I don't really know. It's tough because you haven't really seen much from him yet, but he has a high ceiling. So this deal could end up being very good in a few years. But there's a lot of unknown there. So it kind of worries me. And I say a lot of unknown for both camps here. The agent could feel like an asshole if Kotkaniemi kind of lives up to that third overall pick status, and he's only making 5.5 or whatever. So yeah, a lot of unknown there. I guess it's okay. Yeah,
we'll see. Case, your conditional A grade, that was a very deadline type answer. I like the
exactly
condition attached to it. That was very good. All right, this one was a pretty big deal, and this guy has been out there in trade rumors for, it seems like, forever, and that is Rickard Rakell going from Anaheim. So he's the last out of the big three, out of him, Lindholm and Manson, to leave the Ducks organization. He goes to Pittsburgh, who quietly makes a big move here in exchange for a second-round pick in this year's draft. Forwards Zach Aston Reese and Dominic Simone, and Cale Klang, a goaltender, I would assume a prospect, because I know nothing about him, going back to Anaheim. So this is a pretty sizable trade. What do we think about this move?
Oh, yeah, this is tough. I'm going to give Pittsburgh a plus here, actually, now that I think about it a little more. I think this player fits in so well, Rakell here in Pittsburgh. That's a great winger. Throw him with Crosby and he could put up 30 goals, because anyone can, apparently. So I do like it. He's got a lot of skill, and we're finally seeing him be moved. So I'm going to give A plus for Pittsburgh making that happen. And then Anaheim, I'll give them a minus, because I'll give them a B, because I expected a first round pick in a Rickard Rakell deal, and they waited too long. If they did it last year, I know, Chad, you were mentioning this before. If they did it last year, they're probably getting more. But at the same time, I like Zach Aston Reese, so it's not terrible. So I'll give them a B.
Yeah, I will give Pittsburgh an A here, because I think Rakell is a guy who can provide offense and easily slide into that, top six with either Crosby or Malkin in the place of Kasperi Kapanen, who has sort of fallen down the depth chart and out of the lineup for this team. So Rickard Rakell for the Pittsburgh Penguins, that's an A for me. And then for the Ducks, I'm going to give them a C, because just like you said, Case, I mentioned beforehand, when this deal went down, if they traded him 2 years ago when talks first happened, they would have got 2 first-round picks. And it was because Anaheim didn't choose a direction early enough. You have to be early in your choice, and you have to commit to it. And they did neither of those, and that's why they didn't get a bigger return for the player today. Okay, in true deadline fashion here, breaking. More to that Domi trade than we thought. I was going to bring that up. It was a 3-way trade. Florida Panthers acquire Igor Korshkov from Carolina, a 2022 6th-round pick from Columbus, and retain 25% of Domi's contract. So I think
Florida just kind of made off like bandits here, and I don't really know what was in it for Columbus in the end.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, we'll move on to another big deal from deadline day to finish it off. This one came in right at the buzzer, and it was the Andrew Copp deal. So Copp going to the New York Rangers from Winnipeg, along with a 6th-round pick in 2023, and then going to Winnipeg, forward Morgan Barron, a 2023 5th-round pick, and 2 conditional 2nd-round picks. So one of the 2nd-rounders can turn into a 1st if the Rangers win 2 rounds in the Stanley Cup playoffs and Copp plays 50% of the playoff games. The other 2nd-rounder can be Winnipeg's option in 2022 or 2023. So a lot there, but a big deal. Andrew Copp goes to the New York Rangers.
Man, that is a lot to unpack. I guess I'm going to give Winnipeg a C- here. I think that they got a lot in return, but at the same time, this is drawing a line in the sand at what side of things they are on. This is their direction now, and I think that means they're probably going to lose Mark Scheifele in the end here. So I don't really know how much I like for them here. It's a lot of pieces, but this is going to shake some things up in Winnipeg for sure. The Rangers, I feel a little hypocritical about what I'm about to say because of what I've been saying the whole time. They're just adding so many middle 6 wingers, but I really like Andrew Copp. I'm going to give them an A here because he immediately makes them better. He is such a good player, and we saw that in him last year. It's going to be interesting to see the spark under his ass as soon as he gets traded here. So I like this for the Rangers. And Winnipeg, like, what are Scheifele and Wheeler and those guys thinking right now?
Yeah, that was the first thing that went through my mind was like, what does the team think of Andrew Copp getting shipped out? Because he didn't have to be traded. He was only going to be traded if they got, the right return for him. And in my opinion, they didn't get enough. It was rumored that they were going to get a 1st-round pick for this player plus, and they didn't. So maybe that was, because it happened late in the day and everything else was gone and they just wanted to get, something in return. But so for Winnipeg, I don't like this one bit. I don't think their hand was forced at all. Copp seemed to me like a great depth forward for the team, even though, they're not necessarily a playoff team. So I'm going to give it a C for Winnipeg here. And I'm going to give the Rangers an A+. Like we talked about how they've added, how we've added some, or how the Rangers have added some depth, some bottom 6 forwards. But the best of them all is Andrew Copp. He's a good middle 6 forward who can really improve this team. And again, sticking with the theme for the Rangers, they didn't sell the farm. They, gave what they had. They didn't give a 1st-round pick, and they got a really good player in return. And Morgan,
it can be a 1st-round pick, but I don't see the Rangers winning 2 playoff rounds. So.
Well, exactly. And if they do, then you know what? It's a first. Who cares for them if they win 2 rounds? Like if they make a push. But again, like I've been saying about the Rangers, I don't think they're even a playoff team without Shesterkin. So I'm glad that it wasn't just a full-on 1st-round pick and a 2nd or something. Like I think that's manageable value for this team.
There we go. Quickly, guys, before we wrap up, just say a team. Who do you think wins the Stanley Cup? Who is your Stanley Cup winner this year after the deadline?
Oh man, that's hard. Put me on the spot here, but I'm really liking a strange Stanley Cup final here of Minnesota and Florida.
And who comes out on top? Florida.
Yeah. Who wins?
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh no. Florida. Yeah.
Okay. Chad?
I'm going to say it's going to be a team from the East playing Colorado in the finals. And it's going to be Toronto because as long as Toronto's in their window, I can't bet against them, guys. So I'm going to say Toronto.
I will go with maybe the most obvious one here. And, well, Maybe not, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. Tampa Bay and Colorado, and I will go with the Colorado Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup this year. So interesting. None of us went with Tampa for a three-peat. That's interesting. All right. There we go, guys. And again, we ripped through all of the deals leading up to and during deadline day. So if you want to check out all of the deadline deals that happened, I think there were 25 on deadline day alone. You can head over to tsn.ca, check out the trade tracker there. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a return to our preseason division rankings. We'll get into the East by talking about the Metropolitan Division. So looking forward to getting back to that, and have a good week. Thanks for listening.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.